Governor Northam issued an executive order 53 restricting public gatherings of greater than 10 persons. Accordingly, code section 2.23708 period 2A3 permits public bodies to meet electronically to discuss business required or necessary to operation of public body in discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities in times of emergencies and to address COVID-19. Therefore, this meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia law because the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum physically in a single location. Can we please get the roll call of commissioners?
Mayor Walker,
Present.
Commissioner Goldblatt, Commissioner Lisa Green, Commissioner Maddie Green,
Present.
Commissioner Henry,
Present.
Commissioner Jackson.
Present.
You have quorum.
Okay. General announcements, meetings / reminders. I'm just going to read from the agenda and beginning with the CRHA board work session, which is Tuesday, October 14th, and that's at 6 p.m. The CRH board regular meeting will be Monday, October 25th, and that's at 6 p.m. The safety meeting is every other Tuesday, so the next one will be September 28th, October 12th, and October 26th. Those are at 6 p.m. And then there's a link that goes with that, and I guess you can get that from Laura if you're interested in going to it. Then there's a redevelopment committee, which meets every other Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. and updated time. So September, I guess it met September 20, it says the 2nd and the 16th. And so it doesn't show when the next ones are, but that's every other Thursday. Resident Services Committee is meeting every second Tuesday of the month at 1. They've been doing quite a bit of busy stuff, and I think Kathleen will probably update on some of that later. And then the Maintenance Committee is meeting every 3rd Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. And then finally, the Personnel Committee is meeting every 3rd Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. The Finance Committee still hasn't established a time as of this particular meeting. Does anyone else have any announcements or reminders? Well, if not, then we will hear public comments followed by FAR comments.
And at this time, if you'd like to address the commission, please click your raise hand icon. You'll have 3 minutes for comment. And we have no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, so we should be hearing from FAR.
Shelby had reached out to say that she did not have a comment tonight.
Okay, so then we will go on in terms of the updates from commissioners. And the only one that I have down is safety, and Laura's not here right now. Is there someone else as a commissioner? I think Bridget or Maddie might have something that they want to say, which folds into Section 3 policy. I don't know. If there are no update, do you have any, Nakai?
For the committees?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Personnel Committee, Bridget and I, we're on that. We met twice. I don't know if I gave an update the last time, but we've been reviewing the HR policy. And so we're just in the initial phase of that and discussing what the evaluation process for employees could potentially look like. And that will, of course, come before, any changes will come before the board. And Laura and I have been working on the process for Mr. Sales' evaluation to the board. And the maintenance committee, we met last week. And we're just really trying to get the process, planning on eventually, I guess, meeting in person and being on site and talking to individuals, who live on site about their concerns. But it was our initial meeting. And so that's it. That's my update. And if you have anything to add, if I forgot something, but.
Commissioner Green, did you have anything to say?
I think we'll hear from all the staff, but yeah, we're, looking at the Section 3 policy, which Joy and Kathleen have been working really hard on tonight. And the resident services also has been working hard. So I'm looking forward to that update from the staff. That's all.
Okay, so then we can hear from Section 3 policy resolution 1431, Section 3 policy.
And can I just apologize quickly? I said Bridget and sorry, Commissioner Jackson.
It's totally fine.
Great, thank you. Can everyone see what I'm sharing on the screen? Great, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Johnson.
Good evening. So my task tonight is to just kind of highlight some stuff with the Section 3 policy that has been out for 45 days now and needs to be approved so that we can have a policy. So the Section 3 table of contents is here, and it's all listed to see what is in the policy. The things that I will be highlighting on is the Section 3 goals, the self-certification, and compliance. And just to also tell you about the new rules. So in Section 3 is a part of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. Sorry, Kathleen, next. I can't really see, okay, I'm gonna move this down. Okay, I got you. So the first part in our policy reads, for the public's sake, this policy is developed for the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority for the exclusive use of the agency, hereafter referred to CRHA, its contractors, subcontractors, bidders, developer, subgrantees, related affiliates, and instrumentality, collaborating local government entities, and other sub-recipient of covered funding in the partnership with CRHA. The funding type and program grant name may change over the years. However, the intent of the policy is to encompass all applicable funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. All hiring and contracting must meet Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. And you can find that in 24 CFR 135 requirement. All hiring and contracting must meet conflict of interest requirements set forth in the federal, state, or local law regulations of policies and comply with internal CRHA hiring policies. And then next it goes on to talk about the purpose, which I talked about it a little bit. So even though we had a Section 3 policy, it started out just being HUD money, for public housing, but there is a Housing and Community Development Act of 1992 that also go in effect. So anytime we're using any kind of community development dollars, any HUD dollars, that triggers Section 3. So home funds, CBDG funds, all of that triggers Section 3 policies and regulations. Any questions? Number next. Section 3 requirement requirement applied to all projects and activity funding in whole in part with covered funds. So for instance, the Housing Authority gets subsidy. That subsidy also can use to employ residents as a Section 3 resident. Next one. So on the definition, and I'm gonna go fast through this. If you need me to stop and back up, I will. On the definition, it speaks about the recipients, contractors, subcontractors, new hire, employment opportunity generated by Section 3 assistant, Section 3 worker, targeted worker. Can you just back up a little and go back, Kathleen, to Section 3 worker? So a Section 3 worker fits one or more of the following category: a public housing resident or a housing choice voucher holder. It is employed by a Section 3 business concern. And I don't know why they use business concern, but Section 3 business. An individual that reside in a service area in which the Section 3 covered assistant is expanded, and he or she is a low income person, less than 80% of the area median income. Now, everyone who works in CRHA who doesn't make over 80% of the area median income is considered a Section 3 worker. So this Housing Authority will get a check for that. Targeted Section 3 worker, this individual fit one of the following category: work for Section 3 business concern or live in public housing or Section 8. So, and then go down and then I'll come back and explain something. Very low income person's family whose income does not exceed over 80% of the median income for the area as determined by HUD, and there is the website where you can go to it. Very low income families include single person whose income does not exceed 50%. So low income is 80% of the area median income, and very low is 50% of the area median income. All right. So what I want to say, I want to just pause here for a minute. No, go ahead. I'll back up. Go up. Next one, Kathleen. Go up. Okay, right there. Under Section 3 business, 51% or more owned by very low income person, or over 75% of labor hours performed for the business or performed by low and very low income person. And C, it is a business at least 25% owned and controlled by a current public housing resident or resident who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing. So I just want to explain a little bit about this is a part of the new rules. The old rule basically said before 30%, you have to hire 30% of your worker. Now they're doing it by hours work. And so, in March of 2021, HUD changed the rules. And this is why we have to come up with a new policy. So some of the new rules that I just want to point out to you all under, just 1 minute, let me find it. So just to tell y'all what some of the major change are. Major change in the final rule. The new rule was hours, the new rule is hours worked. Old rule was new hire requirement. A section 3 worker, again, like I said before, is defined as individual income. Individual income is below the low income limit of 80% of the AMI, employed as a low income business concern, youth bill, and hours labor hours benchmark. Section 3 targeted section 3 worker. And there's 5 tiers. I apologize. There's 5 tiers in this. So if you have money that's going into public housing and it is going to rehab or do any kind of work in that site, they ask you to give the people on that site first preference. Even if they get, if their first preference and they're not qualified because they don't have the qualification, then they go to the other public housing sites that is surrounding. So if they're working on West Haven, they couldn't find any qualified people in West Haven, they can go to South First Street. If they can't find anybody there, they can go to Mickey Drive if they can. So they just want to make sure that public housing residents get some opportunity to get hired. If not, then it goes to section 8, and then after section 8 is youth bill, and then after youth bill is the metropolitan area. So what they're doing is starting from in and spreading it out so that you can find low income people to get some of these jobs. Any question? Okay, next
I have
one.
a question. Is this like the policy going forward, or is this what's in effect now?
This will be what I'm going over tonight will be the policy going forward.
Okay.
Because in March of 2021, things, they changed up. They changed quite a few things. The basic idea is still there, but they did change some things. And so in our policy, though, we try to put some more teeth in it, and I will tell you why we did that. All right, next. And under, as you can see, is section 3 converted project. Going up, you can stroll up, Kathleen. All right, section 3 goal and preference. And so anytime there is a contract signed with, that is going to be signed with any developer, these are some of the things that HUD is saying that they would prefer you doing. Training and employment opportunity. Next one. Contracting opportunity for section 3 business, building trades, other contracts. Next page. Self-certification section for section 3 and section 3 business. Now in the package that was sent to you, the policy, there is 2 sections there that speak about the self-certification. It's on page, I don't know if you all have it, but one is on page 14 and one is on page 26. And that's the required contractors form. And then you have the internal department procedures for Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. In the required, you will find form number 2, and that is the business certification form, and form number 4 is the resident self-certification form. And so going forward, after we approve, once this get approved, everyone who has came in and fill out the interest form, I have to go back and make sure these are filled out and is attached to it for tracking purposes. You can go back, Kathleen. All right. So, go on up, Kathleen. No, back up. Okay, self-certification. And under self-certification, it basically tell you that in order to receive preference as a Section 3 residence and a Section 3 business concern, the resident or business must self-certify that they meet the eligibility requirement. CRHA has developed a self-certification form for both Section 3 resident and Section 3 businesses, in which are included in the Section 3 form number 4 and Section 3 form number 2, which I just pointed out to you all. A Section 3 resident seeking preference in employments must fulfill the requirement qualification of the sought position. If asked, they also must provide evidence of their Section 3 status. Example, receipt of public housing assistance addressed in residency. A Section 3 business concern seeking preference in contracting must submit evidence to demonstrate that they are a responsible firm and can perform successfully under the terms and conditions of the proposed contract. If asked, they also must provide evidence of the Section 3 status. It is important to note that all persons and business or business concern are self-certifying their eligibility under Section 3 to CRHA and HUD, and that serve civil and or criminal penalty may apply for false certification. And then it also talk about the contractor's goal, which I'm not going to read all of that just for time. One of the things that I do want to point out is the purpose. You don't have to go back, Kathleen, but the purpose is to ensure that jobs and other economic opportunities caused when HUD assisted housing and community development project goes to low and extremely low people to the greatest extent feasible, you must consider the categories that I told you. The problem we've been running into with the contracts that we now have, the contracts were weak. Number two, what I've learned is that when a contract is signed and they're doing the and they're looking for their subcontractors, those subcontractors already have their staff. They do not have to hire any of our folks in that position. But if they create any new jobs, then they're bound by these rules. So what we're trying to do with ours is to be able to have more teeth in it to say, we want you to hire 2 carpenters, we want you to hire 2 plumbers, we want you to hire, so just to give it a little bit more teeth so we don't get pushed around. You can go on up. Okay, okay. These are some of the requirements. You have notices, enforcement, number next, Kathleen. Facilitation, and then go on. All right. I don't think. The other thing I want to point out, because we ran into this with one of our contractors, it's not just the housing authority responsibility to make sure the community knows about the job training or any kind of jobs that's coming up. It's a partnership. So it's the contractor and the housing authority who is supposed to do, or the contractor in the city, if they're using community development money, who must work together to make sure the communities know about these positions that are coming up. Okay. All right. Economic opportunities to achieve contractors compliance. It's the same thing. Training. And I don't know much about the business. If Mr. Sales is on here, he can talk a little bit about that. The business piece of it, just have not wrapped my brain around it yet, because I am trying to figure out how we get our folks jobs, and just trying to, Kathleen and I have been meeting with different, we now have a Section 3 advisory board, and we will be going over a lot of this to make sure that, we just have a good policy, and that we are using all of the resources, or getting all of the resources we can get to get our folks ready, because we do have to train our folks for some of these jobs. Soft skills is an issue. Substance abuse is an issue. Babysitting, transportation, you name it, all of it is an issue.
Are you working with K-Tech at all to train any of the public housing people in these construction areas?
We will be discussing that at the with the advisory board, like coming up with a training curriculum, coming up with, what are the ABCs or the 1, 2, 3s to get people ready, so that when these contracts is signed and they're ready to go, that we have people ready. So the answer to your question is no, not yet. And okay, go back up. One, compliance monitoring. One of the things I did not talk about a little bit is the Davis-Bacon wage. They have to pay their workers a Davis-Bacon wage, which means that they have to pay them. You can't hire someone as a laborer and have them operating a machine. If they're operating the machine, you have to pay them what a machine operator will get. We have to do prevailing wage. Mr. Sales took me on one, haven't done another one. We plan to do another one, but that haven't happened yet. But we have to be check and balance to make sure that they're paying people what they're hiring people for. We did have one Section 3 hire with Breeden. And he basically had journeyman's license from UVA. He went through their training. And so they did hire him. He is a Breeden employee now. And that was the only hire since the construction has started that have happened. So that's it. If you all have any question, you can direct them to me, myself, or Mr. Sales. Hope I didn't take up too much time.
I just wanted to add that Joy's been working incredibly hard reaching out to local agencies, and we're really trying to establish paid training career paths. And anyone who has ideas about that or connections with local agencies that you think might be interested, would love to talk to you about that.
So I mentioned to Kathleen that at some point when you all are doing a work session, there needs to be a work session around this Section 3, because there's a lot of things that triggers Section 3. Like a lot of people think that I thought I had to learn that, and anytime you are partnering and using if you use 1 penny of any money that is coming from HUD or is CBDG dollars or whatever, then you have these other things you have to do under Section 3. And I don't know if this is entirely correct, but I was told by someone who on the national level who I work with, that there's sometimes federal money trickle down to state, and state then trickle it down to the state. That also trigger Section 3, because it is federal dollars. That's my grandson in the back. I apologize. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for allowing me to do so.
Is there any discussion from commissioners? Anybody have any questions, comments? Section 3 policy?
Well, I
Laura.
noticed Laura is not here, but I noticed.
No,
Laura
she's here now. She has her hand up
okay,
too.
all right. Okay,
Let's hear from
Laura.
Laura.
Okay, so hopefully I'm in transit, so hopefully people can hear me. I did want to ask, I mean, I think that the work here, Ms. Joy, is really impressive, and I know that this has been really, really hard to put together. But I think as an agency, something we need to think about is it's my understanding that federal legislation like this tends to be very poorly enforced because there's not a lot of good enforcement mechanisms. And so I was hoping that we could, I don't know if people have ideas, but one thing we could be thinking in addition to job training, but to be thinking really creatively about how we can make sure that people don't just pay lip service to the Section 3 program, but are genuinely like what incentives, but also what enforcement there is to make sure that they're really hiring residents and that they're really following through on the spirit of the law, even though it doesn't seem like there's actually a lot of teeth behind things like Section 3 programs.
I have a question that maybe follows up on what Laura was saying, is that if someone who we hire has Section 3 included in their contract, would we have, and we find them to not be complying in something like maybe our redevelopment, which has multiple phases, like could we legally stop a contract because someone is not complying to Section 3? I was wondering if our legal person would know that.
Can you ask that again?
If a contractor is not complying with our Section 3, would that be grounds to terminate the contract if we wanted to?
Without better information, I couldn't answer that. I mean, the problem is that it's covered by the UCC. It's also covered by general common law and contracts, and it's also covered by federal contracting guidelines. So I hate to give it that way, but it's just, there are too many complexities. Theoretically, sure. But I couldn't tell you that you could with any sort of definitiveness unless I had the facts of each circumstance.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess it'd also be cost benefit too, if they're working on redevelopment and we want the project to keep going, it'd be counterproductive to stop it sometimes because the cost would be greater. And
it would also disincentivize other people to bid on it, frankly. If we terminated them in the middle of a project, the only people who would profit are the attorneys.
But what can happen is, because what we ran into was that we were sending, like in May, about 6 people went for interviews, and then in June, another 6 went, and then we had 5 other people. So we had about 16, 17 people who did interviews, and we weren't getting anything. And so with our weekly meeting with one of the contractors, we started putting pressure by saying, you know, A, B, C, and D. Kathleen were like really banging at the door to say, hey, this is not happening. And so with working with one of them, I think they finally start looking at the section. They've never done Section 3, even though they were aware about Section 3. They decided that, okay, we will send me some people. We will go through the people that we interviewed. And then they said, oh, well, we have one that we're looking at. And we were like, send us a report. We want an update. So we were doing our due diligence to like say what's going on. Now they decided to hire one, which is not, you know, for me, it's not 100, but at least they did hire one person. Now they have given me an application, and now they are basically saying with the building going up now that we will be looking for A, B, C, and D. So now my job is once this policy is approved, there's some things I got to go back and do, like attach all these papers to all these people who fill out application, but it'll get done. And then also start setting up appointments with them for the upcoming jobs. But it shouldn't be that hard to do, right? It shouldn't. You know, they didn't make I just walked away a couple of times feeling like I should just give this up because people were going for interviews and they weren't getting any callbacks or saying anything. So our goal is to make absolutely sure that we have people ready for when we get to 6th Street, that we have people ready for demolition, that we have people ready for abatement, that we have people ready for coal base, that we have people ready for electrician, that we have people ready for roofing, that we have those people to have a cohort of classes going, which will include, you know, K-Tech, PVCC, and any other local folks who wants to train people, because part of the problem, we did have one class with the city and then COVID hit and there were 2 young ladies in it who, you know, my heart really went out to them because one of them, virtual was hard for that person to learn and they got kicked out the class. And part of what we're trying to do is to make sure that if anybody have any kind of learning disability, that we find the resources, because we're resources rich, to make sure that they can still, you know, have an opportunity. So there is some cultural thing that needs to be dealt with, and who is teaching who and how they're teaching them.
Just a brief, I know that this has been very important for you, that you talked about it for a long time. So it looks like a great, you know, just beginning. And I know that you want to make sure that the answer to that question that Commissioner Green asked is a lot stronger, to make sure that the contractors that work, you know, with CRHA, you can enforce in some way to make sure that the people from the communities are benefiting. So I'm glad that this is, you know, on your plate and that you are as committed to it. Even before now, you've been committed to this for years. So I'm glad to see that it's coming together, and hope that we get as strong as possible policy in place so that the community can benefit in the way that it was intended.
Yes, ma'am. I'm trying.
Okay. So now we want to have Miss Glenn Matthews to share the resolution. Okay, do you want to read it?
I think you'll be the one reading it.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Resolution, CRHA resolution number 1431, a resolution to adopt an amended section policy. Is that, let's say section 3? Okay. Whereas the United States Congress passed section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, 12 USC 170 LU section 3, to further the goal of ensuring that federal funds benefit the low and very low income residents of project funded wholly or partly by those funds. And whereas Part 75 of Section 3 is to establish the standards and procedures to be followed to ensure that the objectives of Section 3 are met. And whereas the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority staff has developed a revised Section 3 policy/plan in adherence to 24 CFR Part 75 that more comprehensively addresses the standards and procedures prescribed in the Act. And whereas the Section 3 plan, as reviewed by the Housing Authority senior staff members and their comments incorporated into the policy/plan. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners authorizes the development and implementation of the revised Section 3 policy/plan to ensure compliance with federal law. This resolution shall become effective immediately upon its adoption by this board. Resolved this 27th day of September 2021 by the CRHA Board of Commissioners. One thing I would like to say, please do a spell check and get those spaces before you have me sign it. Okay?
Yeah.
Discussion?
I move that we approve the resolution.
You get a second?
I second that.
Okay, somebody get a call? Question?
All right, Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Green, Commissioner Maddie Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
and it is passed.
Thank you.
Good work.
Yay.
Okay, so now we will hear from the finance director and her update.
Hello. We'll see how my camera does on this. My Wi-Fi is a little spotty. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the notes I provided or to look at the financial statements. Kathleen, are you able to share the financials?
Sure, just give me a second.
Okay. I mean, overall, the agency organization is in good shape. I think in large part due to one-time funds. So as a financial director, you never want to get too comfortable with anything that's beating the budget because it's an unusual circumstance. And the biggest thing, when she gets that up there, we can see, I separated out our shortfall funds that are coming from HUD. And I also separated out the money that we pulled out and towards the wages for from the PPP loan, the second loan. Oh, I wanted the actual financial statement. So one change that I've made since I've been here, what used to happen in the past kind of relates to some of the discussion we had last week surrounding the personnel committee, is that when they did the books, there was one account called FICA taxes or whatever, and anything that was benefit related got posted to there. So any type of insurance bill for the employees' benefits got posted there. I think the only thing that maybe didn't was workers' comp, but health, vision, dental, retirement, and there's several other smaller miscellaneous benefits that rolled through there. Likewise, all of the deductions that came out of an employee's payroll, they're supposed to, contribute so much towards their health insurance, went into that account. And because we have so many different cost centers, and so someone like a maintenance person whose salary is spread across all the public housing cost centers, you spend $10 for them and it's split up, 7 or 11 or however many different ways for every single cost center, including the scattered sites are individualized. So it gets messy. And when you look at that and you try to reconcile it, it's extremely difficult. And for the most part, the reconciliation hasn't been done. At the end of the year, they would look at it and they would say, well, all the deductions should have been applied towards all the bills. And once that's done, anything that's left over, if it's too much or too little, we'll just run it through the expense side of it. And it could be significant. And the reason that you want to pay attention to that, because month to month, week to week, if you're not paying attention to it, you don't know am I taking too much out of somebody's salary? Am I not taking anything at all? Did I just forget something, or was there a recalculation done that we didn't adjust for? So now, when we look at the expense side, if Kathleen can find them, they're attached to the email that went out for the meeting.
Could you, actually, it wasn't. Could you send it to me?
Sure. If you can hang on one second. Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So basically, I've set up accounts trying to capture some of the things that I know as being financial director, I want to pay attention to, not only on the benefits side, but on the revenue side. So that's good right there. That's fine. So we'll take a step back. One of the things that happened on here, under the grant income section, is you can see we added account 3401-10 subsidy shortfall, or HUD PHA shortfall funds. So you can see now year to date that actually it's called the period to date. So I guess if you want to scroll over a little bit, need to change my view. You can see that those two lines together, we're doing really well. The first line of our normal operating grants and subsidy from HUD, but we're actually behind our budget. Yep, right there, 794 versus 855. Overall, we're doing great because we've accounted for over $300,000 of shortfall funds in this period. It's just really important to know that when you say, oh, you know, they're doing great financially, well, there's a reason for it. And you know, parts of it may continue, or we may try to get it to continue, but it's not through our normal operations that we're doing so well. And the other piece of it, if you could scroll back over so we can see the accounts. And scroll down to the next page with the expenses. Yep, right there. Oh, up a little bit. Thank you. So what you see here, this is public housing, the central office, and all the HCV programs combined. So the first two lines there, and you'll see it again down in, actually, I don't think it is in maintenance, because I don't think maintenance has applicable salaries, but under the administrative salaries, we added this contra account. What happened last year is, say we had total salaries of $1 million. At the end of the year, I think it was $202,000 was the first PPP loan. That $1 million just got reduced by the $200,000, and it got pulled out and charged against to zero out the PPP loan. And there is computational reasons why we would pull the salaries out versus add the revenue. It's to our benefit to reduce our expenses. It has a better net effect than increasing the revenue. We don't have that option with the shortfall funds. So they're handled a little bit differently, but the effect is the same. It improves our bottom line. So here, so we have an idea of what our true administrative salaries are, $252,000. You know, at the end of the day, it's going to be less $125,000 that we've allocated this fiscal year to that second PPP loan. And then the other area that I started talking about a little, oh, so you can see here, employee insurance is health, vision, and dental. Retirement is now separated out, as is unemployment, disability. We offer a fitness program, and then workers' comp, I think, always had its own account. Some of those are fairly minor, but it does help with the reconciliation to make sure that we're withdrawing the correct amount from the employees. And over the years, those errors have gone both ways. Sometimes we've took out too much, sometimes we didn't take out enough. So we want it to be the Goldilocks amount. If you could scroll down a little bit to the next page or towards the bottom. I want to get to legal or the, the insurances. You can keep going. General, there it is, general expenses. So here's another, oh, up a little bit right there. Here's another area where the insurance, I believe we had property liability, and then everything else got run through the miscellaneous taxes, licenses, and insurance. I broke that out to include auto because that is a significant amount now. We do have, I think it's 10 or 12 vehicles. The other business insurance are 2 new riders, it looks like, that got put on the account. Relative, like maybe within the last 2 years, it's cyber insurance and a crime, which is intentional employee theft. So they're relatively small compared to the rest of the policy, but the property insurance all are broken out according to the tables that are provided by the insurance. So that's kind of the nitty gritty of it. I think overall, if you take out the shortfall funds and the PPP funds and look at the programs at their whole, they're still operating fairly successful, but not as well as once we include those amounts in there. And then I think the only other thing that I wanted to point out, if you happen to catch it, if you're really like scrutinizing these financial statements, on the COC cost center, that statement that's presented by itself, because we were able to tap HUD funds for all the public housing salaries, maintenance salaries, and other public housing staff. We can't use it for salaries related to our central office administrative salaries or redevelopment or the city program cost center. So in this fiscal year, for what we had left, we went and pulled out those salaries from the first pay period that happened in April that actually was paid in this fiscal year until the money ran out. I think it took us up to like maybe the payrolls in July or actually August. And because on the COC cost center, it looks like we pulled more money out than we had expenses because it has to do with the way the year ended. We recorded the last 8 days of the first payroll that got paid in fiscal year 21-22 to last year because it's accrual accounting. It's like essentially if you worked up till March 31st, last year has to grab those expenses. But when we recorded the whole payroll, if you look at it on a cash basis, all those wages were paid in April. The PPP money, the clock started ticking in March. So it doesn't care what fiscal year you're in. And that'll basically wash out with the next payroll. You won't see that negative amount anymore. And we'll report the actual payrolls that we used it for to the Small Business Association. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but I guess if someone said, hey, how are you having negative expenses? It just has to do with the timing of when the payroll hit our books and in our fiscal year end. So does anybody have any questions? Kathleen, I think if you scroll down to page 12 on the PDF, you can see that. What I was just talking about.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna lose any money with regard to PPP or any of the other programs? Because you hear a lot about the federal government clawing monies back.
Oh, right there. Stop. So you can see under, I will answer your question just to point this out. What's
Okay.
on the screen? The administrative salaries, it says 117, but we pulled out 125. It's because that 8,000 was due to March. But with the PPP, we don't really have to be that specific. So if it was 8,000 from March or 8,000 from the end of when we stopped doing it, it doesn't really matter. But what we'll submit to them, just so we have a continuous flow of when we started using the money, we're going to start it in March. Chair Henry, to answer your question, we should not. Now we do have to apply for forgiveness of that, and we do expect to get it. The people that are having it pulled back, if you read some of the stories when it first became available, the companies knew that they had no right to it. They hadn't lost any revenue. They were still employing workers. Like and they got millions. I mean, it's actually very interesting if you do some Googling on that to see what companies got what money. You can go in there and you can just type in Charlottesville, and anyone that is in Charlottesville or has Charlottesville in their name or whatever parameters you put in there, you can see exactly how much money they got, and you'll be surprised. Like private practice physician's office got a couple $1 million because they had to continue and protect the payroll of their very highly compensated physicians. So I don't believe that we're in that position, and we are certainly on the lower end of the allocations. Like I said, so many places got millions and millions. So right now it is on our books as a liability in total. So hopefully we can not have to worry about any type of repayment, because it was considered a loan until you can prove that you used it to pay. It was salaries, rent, and utilities. We weren't allowed to use the latter two just because of the way HUD reimburses us, and we were very careful to have no overlap with what we were requesting from HUD or what we've already gotten from HUD. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if Laura has a question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble with my mute button. So I do have a question. I understand that like we have all this PPP money and otherwise, and that it's not due to our normal operations, which is somewhat alarming to think about what's coming, because I'm sure that we're going to see that lots of residents are going to be dealing with, needing to pay a lower rent for some time. Are there any programs, like, could you give us just even, I don't know how long a list this is, but an update on like what programs we intend to apply for or have already applied for to get additional funding? And if there's any planning long-term in terms of operations to say, what are we going to do to try to get our long-term operations on track to the best of our possibility, like to the best of our abilities, so that we're not in a really dire financial straits as soon as all this money expires or is spent?
Well, I think the good news is that there is likely to be shortfall funds available from HUD. It is limited to what we can use it for. It is obviously primarily the public housing programs. I do know that through the city funded position with the, I want to call it sustainability, but I think I'm getting my position titles mixed up, but the eviction avoidance role that Claudette Green is filling, that in a large part is operating as following up on outstanding receivables. I mean, internally we have had a conversation as to how we can equitably apply money that comes from the city without encouraging non-payment of rent. And so we really need to look at those programs in the future. But I guess, I mean, Kathleen, I'll kind of defer to you. She did cue me in, it's the Housing Stabilization Coordinator position. But in terms of other funding, I know she's been pretty dogged in trying to recruit additional funds. But on the public housing side, we do expect there to be shortfall funds available there. And the state of Virginia has the rent relief program. That was what I wanted to mention, that if Claudette were here, she could certainly speak to that. That's an issue where she's trying to get our residents signed up for that program to be able to receive money from them to cover their rent. But I'm not the expert to answer that question by any means at this point.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
So could you explain a little bit, I just don't fully understand what you changed when you were talking about the maintenance workers and that they are spread across AMPs and what that looked like. How is that, how do we see that here?
Well, and the one that you're looking at, this is actually the COC. Kathleen, if you scroll to any one of the AMPs, I mean, I don't know that you'll actually, it's not super, oh, you can stop here. Or go to maintenance salary, sorry. It's maybe on the next page. There you go. Oh, scroll up a little bit. So we look at the allocations for primarily the maintenance department because they service all of our sites. So we look at, basically it's been approved by HUD, it was prior to my getting here, but we did adjust it this year with the changes at Crescent Halls. If we have the 376 available housing units, then Crescent Halls has 105 of them, and you're going to test me, I don't know how many West Haven has, but it's a fraction of our total. And that basically are how all the salaries and every benefit, when you look at our vehicle expense, for example, the vehicle insurance and the gas, when we get a bill in, our software helps us, but there's basically a formula to say, and when you look at the scattered sites, they get a fraction of a fraction, because only a couple units. So yeah, it's just allocated out.
Okay, I get it. So because I didn't see that, I'm just like, maybe I just need more explanation. Okay.
Well, and when I started here, I was printing all the cost centers out individually and saying, okay, well, which ones can I add up and get a total? And some of it works behind the scenes. And there were some issues with some things. I don't think any of the reports that we ever gave you, but there were some internal reports that said it was all. And there were things that were missing and there were things that shouldn't have been included. So we've just kind of cleaned that up a little bit so that it's, relevant. And I understand it now too, obviously, as to what's included in there. But it just makes for a messy general ledger because everything's split out so many different ways. So
okay.
So some of this,
go ahead.
I was just going to say some of the accounts that we've set up, it narrows it down a little bit, so we know that what the disability is, what the retirement should be, and we can. It's just much easier to try to reconcile.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and so then you just in the notes it just said that the CRHA program is excluded, but may be added in the future.
Yeah, so I've presented the financial statements as had been traditionally provided to you. And I believe there should be more information because it's not the CRHA program isn't part of the HUD dealings, but it's obviously part of our organizational operations.
Yeah.
So we do have an all that includes that, and likewise with redevelopment. When the budget was approved, other than the salaries that are appropriated to those two cost centers, there really was no other like budget created for them. And
Mhm.
John and I, Mr. Sales and I have spoken about that we really need to have a full operational budget for the board to approve and to review going forward. And those programs can certainly be separated out and presented separately, similar to the COC.
Mhm.
And that was part of the budget. That was part of the budget revision that I actually personally had hoped to do it over the summer, and we just have not been able to get to it to include those two cost centers with the relevant expenses, because we're certainly allocating expenses to them.
Mhm.
But what we've just been able to do with the PPP money and those programs, it helped them a lot, because there's not as many revenue sources to cover those other expenses. Like with CSRAP, I think it's mainly the rent, and then an administrative fee that doesn't cover some of the allocated salaries that go there. And
Mhm.
likewise with redevelopment, that's more of certainly a cost center than a revenue center with what we try to accomplish with that program.
Yeah, but I do think it's important to see those things, and especially if we end up, I mean, I think the board needs to fully understand the budget in case there like comes a time where there's a larger request than the city currently has allocated or something like that. I think when there's advocacy for that additional funding, that if there have been presentations on what's going out, why, what those increases are, then it's just a better understanding.
I agree. We can, I can kind of put it as a goal to try to provide all those two additional, it's really just those two additional funds. There are some other funds within our general ledger, but it is more an accounting function, not necessarily, it's not tracking our business operations. It's more of, it sits here until it gets cleared out kind of thing. It's not, it wouldn't affect our financial position in any meaningful way whatsoever.
So like if there's a nonprofit established that we've been talking about, that would be one that would be included in the presentation in the future, or no?
Yes, but it would be its own company.
Yeah, okay.
So it should be presented wholly separate as a separate entity.
Mm-hmm. But right now it's supposed to have the same, well, possibly the same staff, right? I don't remember like having a different finance director or accounting or whatever.
Right. Nope, that's fine.
Okay.
And you can have
Okay.
shared services, and it's
Okay.
similar to what we do with the departments now. We can allocate a piece of that over, and the difference there would be they would actually have to make a payment to the other company, because they wouldn't share a checking account, kind of like all these cost centers do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I had one more question. So are all the amps doing well?
That is a good question. I think mainly because of the shortfall funds they are, and I do think, and I do wish Mr. Sales was here, because he could respond better to Crescent Halls and some of the effects of what we're going to see there. I mean, that's actually shifting to basically AMP2 is going to be phased out, and I think that happened as of September 1st. So I have to figure it out in short order for the September statements, but I believe it's now AMP9, but I, again, am not the right person to look at that. But against budget overall, I believe all the amps are ahead of their budgets.
Okay.
And the individual AMP financials are presented, and as I'm looking at them, that actually is true. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So any more questions, comments?
I think I have one more question.
Of course.
But you had mentioned that there were things that had been paid, even though the services were still not there. Are all of those things, have you captured all of those things?
I mean, the answer is I don't know, but
Okay.
I think that we're close. You know, today, for example, is something that we've been kind of, we knew of for a while, but we haven't devoted the time to it. There's a thing with the phone lines and our fax lines and Crescent Halls, and something was disconnected by mistake by the vendor, and then they couldn't set it back up because the city of Charlottesville is restricted as to who is allowed to do that. It's only CenturyLink, and I actually had a phone conversation with the vendor that provided the original service today. They're like, they physically wouldn't give us a line to be able to reconnect that once it got disconnected by mistake, yet we were still paying the old vendor. So we're looking to disconnect it if we can, but there may be lines attached to the fire system or the elevator for emergency services. So it's like, we just really need to do our due diligence on some of these services before we get rid of them. But there's been other like little things that it's like, you know, items weren't returned, or most of those I think we've kind of caught, and we're paying so much more attention to it now. So there's still some reconciliation to do on the benefits side, especially with the VRS. We kind of touched on it a little bit in the personnel committee meeting, but yeah, I do feel like we're getting close.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to public comments, I wanted to give Laura the chance to have any comments, because I know she was sort of intransient earlier when all of the other commissioners spoke. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to say about safety committee?
Yeah, so the only thing I'll add is that there's been a lot of changes since our last meeting in terms of the safety committee. And so it's my understanding, I know Mr. Sales isn't on the call, but I know that he had a meeting with the interim CPD, or the interim chief of Charlottesville Police, and that he's open to an MOU, which is something that we've wanted. And so that was good news with residents. There was also a lot of meetings. I was in a meeting that was facilitated by Todd Niemeyer about the crisis response group, and a lot of talk about getting social services into residents and finding ways to help residents deal with trauma. But I think there continues to be really active interest both in care after a violent incident occurs, but also preventing them in the first place. And I think that those conversations are ongoing and will look different depending upon how this role is filled and how long it's vacant. But the other piece is that it's my understanding, this might have already come up at the start of the meeting, but that cameras have started to go up. And so we have our safety committee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'll be eager to hear from residents how they feel about cameras going up, but also how they're feeling about some of the changes, and if there's any updates to the conversations with the interim chief of police. So those are the updates I have from the safety committee.
Thank you. Any comments on safety? If not, then public comments.
At this time, if you'd like to join us for public comment, please click your raise hand icon. You'll have 3 minutes for comment. And we have Brandon Collins. Brandon, you have 3 minutes. You're on with the CRHA.
Good evening, CRHA Board of Commissioners. My name is Brandon Collins. I am a resident of the city of Charlottesville. Lived here my entire life. Have children here who have lived here their entire lives until one of them recently moved away. I was going to take this opportunity to address the board as a private citizen. Friday was my last day of employment with the Public Housing Association of Residents, which is your awesome resident council and resident advisory board. And in about a week's time, I'm going to go start working for y'all. And in the meantime, I figured I would address you all and just give you a couple of thoughts as a private citizen. When I first came to work with FAR, war with the housing authority. There was a hostile administration and a hostile board. Now that was a long time ago, and it took a lot. It took a lot of battling it out. It took a lot of residents who went through really, really, really hard times. And somehow this board and your organization, along with FAR, have been able to overcome that battle. And I just want to highlight that, looking back, how much progress has been made. And I think ultimately this is benefiting residents. I think there's a long ways to go, but as far as CRHA board goes, I think it's vitally important to recognize the transformational work that's been going on, and how important it is to work with the resident council and resident advisory board, which is FAR. FAR will fight, and they're good at it. And residents will mobilize if they're in a bad spot. And it is really, really important to maintain an amazing working relationship with the resident council. And I don't worry that that's going to change, but I do want to just say, looking back after everything I've seen, how important that is and how that's fairly unique in this world and in public housing. Everything's not perfect. Hey, Kingston. It's not perfect, and it is very difficult. HUD is a giant bureaucracy. And if you could imagine being a low-income resident, trying to keep your life together, keep your kids in school, deal with COVID, deal with everything that life throws your way, and live under this oppressive bureaucracy, and be expected to attend meetings and participate in determining your own future, that's a lot. That's a huge weight for residents. And I think FAR is uniquely poised to help residents engage. And this housing authority right now is uniquely poised to begin to transform how public housing is in Charlottesville, so in the nation. And so part of that leads into redevelopment. I really hope that this board can be deeply in tune with a really important thought, which is the city of Charlottesville, along with the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority, are guilty of pretty awful crimes to the Black community in Charlottesville. And this is an organization that I'm getting ready to go work for, and that's really hard. It's something I never thought would happen. But I think, and I hope that the board is in touch with the idea that community and that CRHA can play a role in that, and redevelopment can be one way to begin to repair some of the damage. So it means not just the buildings, but actually making an attempt to pay back, to make amends to the community for things that happened 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 5 years ago. And so I really hope the board moving forward will keep that close to them, the idea of transforming the housing authority and making reparations. At the end of the day, I love Joy, I love Audrey, I love Katrina, Tina, Washington board secretary, and I really love the CRHA. Awful when I started, and a lot of work has been done to have a board that cares, that wants to see this transformation happen. And so I really encourage you all to do that. All that said, residents don't always see this amazing progress. And there are a lot of hard feelings out there with residents about their day-to-day quality of life. And I really look forward to helping to improve that. And I hope that CRHA board and staff will keep that in mind, that there's still a long ways to go to build out trust and to begin those reparations. So just want to say all that. Love you all. I'll see y'all on Monday.
And Chair, there are no other hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Two oversights, I guess, from the agenda that were just brought to my attention. The first is there was no mention of the minutes, and we also did not receive copies of the minutes. So I'm assuming then that they were not ready.
We
Yes,
received them. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, I'll stop talking.
Go ahead.
Our administrative staff is no longer with us, and I know we're running a little bit behind on that. And we're working on getting them out.
Okay.
But we have them from the, we have the July 26 minutes. They were sent in a later email.
Wouldn't it be the August minutes though, that we need to
Yeah.
approve?
Okay, that's what I'm looking, okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That's okay. But then the second oversight, unless things were changed again, because I know that the section 3 was going to take a long time, but we did not have anything on the agenda with regard to a report from Mrs. Glenn Matthews. And I did ask you before if you had any comments, but did you have a formal presentation that was overlooked?
No, and we realized that Mr. Sales was not able to make it tonight, and and Joy and I had talked, and we really wanted to go through the whole policy. So if you do look at the report that I sent out, it's definitely a lot longer than usual. And I encourage you to read it. I'm going to start using this new format, really detailing what's happening at each site. And we would love feedback on that. And as Brandon joins us on the 4th, it'll also have a whole section about some of the outreach that's happening.
Okay, so then I didn't overlook you.
No, that John had revised the agenda.
I saw, that's what I was working from, the revised agenda. So just wanted to make certain. And any other thing I need to hear from my commissioners before I ask about adjourning? Okay. Anyone want to move that we adjourn? Or did I just move that we adjourn?
I move.
I second. Anyone want to call the question for us, please? Please.
Kathleen.
Yep. Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Green, Commissioner Maddie Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Night. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.